The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 117.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Bravehearty.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Position person.
Wearing a bit thin.
Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 10th Doctor story, 42. That's a lot of numbers. Joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going, Dom?
Good. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Before we get started, as usual, I want to remind you to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on our Facebook page, just the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Retweet us on Twitter. Is it retweet us or retweet us? I don't even know how you pronounce it. Retweet us. Otherwise, I'm getting a little bit of a British pronunciation, I think. We're at SQPN on Twitter. I'm feeling a little weird today, guys, so just bear with me. Leave us comments. Subscribe at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, on YouTube, where you should hit the bell to get notifications. And, of course, please share this crazy, crazy podcast with your friends to help us grow our community and reach more listeners. So we're talking about an episode of the new Who with the 10th Doctor, David Tennant. This is 42, aired or broadcast in May of 2007. And we're continuing in that third season with Martha Jones as his companion. And so basically the recap of this episode is the Doctor and Martha, they follow a distress signal and end up trapped on a spaceship that's hurtling toward a sun with only 42 minutes left till impact. And the gimmick of the show, shall we say, is that it takes place in about real time. About.
Give or take.
Not exactly real time, because some things happen before and after, but a typical episode is about 45 minutes with credits and stuff, and so we end up in a sort of real time 24 sort of thing.
Well, and that there's even an illusion there, because so the TV show 24 started in 2001 and became extremely popular, and that real-time format, that 24 had became something that a lot of people experimented with, and this episode is a deliberate allusion to that, which is why it's called not 24 but 42.
Flip it around. Yeah.
Well, and I mentioning before we started recording, I was very disappointed that there was no reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because of course 42 is the meaning of the life universe and everything.
Yeah.
Right.
And there wasn't even as Don said, there wasn't even "Don't panic," nothing, right. No reference to Douglas Adams at all. Very disappointing in that. Which
you would expect, because Douglas Adams was a script editor on Doctor Who back in the day. I mean, there's a connection. So yeah, that was
back in Tom Baker's day.
Yep. So that was kind of a lost opportunity. But this episode is also notable for something else behind the scenes, which is that this was Chris Chibnall's first Doctor Who story. Of course, he'd already been the head writer of Torchwood at this point, the Doctor Who spinoff. But this was his first story for Doctor Who, and of course we know that he's now the showrunner in the most recent season and the upcoming season with the 13th Doctor. So
and it's the best thing he's ever written for Doctor Who, and the only really satisfying thing.
Right. So and of course we talked about this episode a little bit in our review of Chris Chibnall's work on Doctor Who that we did before the beginning of the most recent season, the 11th season. But and you can go back and listen to that overall. I mean, he's had some hot messes of episodes, most notoriously Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, which I mean, I know you guys are looking forward to getting to that in the course of things. So
we'll have fun ripping that one apart.
Yes. Another notable addition to this episode is one of the characters, the doctor on the ship, not the doctor, but the woman who plays the doctor on board the ship they board.
Abby.
Abby, thank you, is played by Vinette Robinson, who would later play Rosa Parks in
That's right.
Rosa episode written by Chris Chibnall. So apparently he liked working with her and maybe had worked with her other times. And he does have a habit of bringing in people that he's worked with on other shows into his work.
She was really nice. I really liked her character. She was very enjoyable. Unfortunately, she's not in that much of the episode because her character dies pretty quickly. But
yes, she is short-lived, literally, in this. So the episode itself, it's a running around crazy with your hair on fire sort of episode. I mean, that's just sort of what it is,
and that's what real-time TV drama is meant to be.
Right.
What I liked about this, even though it is a lot of literally running through corridors on this spaceship, for once it feels like there's a reason for that.
Well, it's a very, very long spaceship.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also they're doing stuff, and they've got to get from one place to another, and it's not just fleeing through corridors.
Right.
It's like goal directed. We're going through corridors.
Right. That's actually a very important, I think, difference for dramatic purposes. Is if you're just constantly running away from something, that can get old fast. But you know, they've got to run here to do a task and then run there to do a task, and bad things are happening. It's not just simply running. I mean, things are going on, and the doctor. I mean, it's kind of like me on a Saturday when my wife is out and I've got 5 kids. You know, like I'm running from one crisis to the next, trying to keep everything together. And that's what it looks like with the doctor. Is he's running from one crisis to another, trying to keep it all together. Right. And you could sense in him, as well done by David Tennant and by Chibnall writing this, the growing tension and crisis in him as he's trying to keep it all together. And
he barely hangs on by his fingernails, and he is not the one who solves the ultimate problem at the end for once. It's a team effort, which and he is out of commission by the end of it. He's helpless. He would have died if it hadn't been for everyone else working together who still survived at that point. Which is one of the things I like about this. It's a good, basic, fun adventure episode. It doesn't have a magic ending. They have to build the solution piece by piece. There's not some Deus Ex Machina at the end where everything gets solved with, something they could have done at any time. It's nice. It's also, it has a kind of standard morality story where humans tampered in something they shouldn't, and they're having payback now. But it also has some really emotionally moving moments. There's the moment where, and both of them involving people falling into the sun. There's the moment where Martha and Riley are falling away from the spaceship in the escape pod, and the doctor's watching Martha, and you have this silent moment because there's no atmosphere between them, but he's screaming. Right. And then later when you have, I forget her last name, but Kath, the captain, McDonald. Yeah. She is sacrificing herself to save everybody else by luring her former husband / sun creature into the airlock and then tripping the airlock. So they're blown out into space. And the last thing she says is, "I love you." And, it's really effective.
Yes, it is. There's, I would say that one of the things that's very interesting about this is, like a lot of this episode so far this season, there is a parallelism between what is going on with Martha and what they did with Rose. And I don't think it's just that they're copying or that they don't have new ideas. I think there's an intentionality in it, so this episode is very similar to Impossible Planet in Satan Pit. That whole where the planet was falling into a black hole instead of into a sun, because the people who were on board the space station on the planet surface, as opposed to a spaceship, were doing something they weren't supposed to be doing. And so there was all this. It's very similar, but I think it's a parallelism. I think it's intentional in that case.
And we even start and close the episode with bits of business along that order, where at the beginning of the episode, the doctor is tweaking Martha's mobile phone. So she now has universal roaming, which is something he did for Rose very early on.
Yep.
And it's taken all this time for him to do it for Martha. And then at the end of the episode, he gives her a TARDIS key.
Yep.
And that was, again, something he gave Rose very early. And Martha's really had to earn her place because we're now 8 episodes in to the Martha saga.
Yep.
And it wasn't until last episode that she became an official ongoing companion. And so now he's finally doing the companion things for her.
Of course, the problem with that, with those parallels, is that weakens Martha as a character.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about that before, but Martha is almost kind of a forgotten companion during the Tennant era because there are these parallels that they ran between her and Rose. And I think it really gives her kind of short shrift as a character that they did it that way.
It makes her the counterpoint to Rose as opposed to a character standing all on her own.
Correct.
Yeah, although I think it makes me like Martha that she overcame that adversity because she got a raw deal with the Doctor.
True.
And she proved herself anyway, as this episode illustrates. I mean, she even kind of takes the vinegar out of him a little bit at the end by saying, didn't really need you in the end, did we? Whoa.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Speaking of the universal roaming, so they first did it for Rose. Of course, they didn't do this in Classic Who because people didn't have cell phones.
Nope.
But so the first time we saw this was for Rose. But then he'll do it again for Donna, Amy, and Rory. And then he'll do it to a phone when he's trapped on the planet of San Helios. Which is that? Was it the Rings of Akatan? No, that's one of the specials where he's companionless before the regeneration. This Doctor, but that's it.
Now what they need to do, but they didn't have smartphones really yet. They did, but not like we do today. Is not only do you need universal roaming, you need universal data. Because then Martha could have just Googled who had the most number ones pre-download, Elvis or the Beatles.
I'm just impressed that the smartphone had the software built in to handle universal roaming through time and space, so that would actually show up on the display.
Yes, apparently, yeah. Well, it's interesting. There was a comic, a Doctor Who comic book that had that did it later when one of the companions had a smartphone. And he installed the Doctor app, which does a lot of the same thing. And the icon is the TARDIS. I want that app actually. It must be sideloaded. So as we mentioned, this is Martha's first real trip as companion on the TARDIS, and right off the bat they get this distress signal, and we get TARDIS separation. The TARDIS is locked away.
For a good reason.
Right, it's locked away in a room that is because it's 3,000 degrees. They just land in the wrong place, wrong side of that door. The engine is out. The ship has gone mad. There are 7 people on board, and someone has smashed the engine on purpose. I mean, that's boom, confronted off the bat for the Doctor.
Right. Also, our environment reflects on the ship. It's claustrophobic because it's this kind of grungy spaceship, but it's everything is like red and orange in the color scheme to suggest visually the heat.
Yes,
that everyone is experiencing, and it's effective. I like the bright colors. Modern Who, the recent season felt a lot of the time washed out with the color palette.
Well, the ship very much looked like a construction site, a work ship. It did not look like a cruise liner. Sometimes you'll see these and Classic Who would kind of do that. You'd be on a cargo ship, and it looked like a luxury cruise liner.
Right.
Going through the corridors.
This is, although the color palette and the situation are a little different. I mean, if you think about it, this is basically the Nostromo from Alien. It's an industrial ship. It's not meant to be pretty. It's a cargo transport, just like the Nostromo.
Yep.
And it is, so you got all this machinery all over the place. And something alien is loose and killing people one at a time. So this is basically Alien meets 24.
Yep. Right. Yes. And like you said, Jimmy, the production design on this is great. They filmed on location in some industrial places, which is actually become a thing. A lot of sci-fi are using these industrial places to substitute for spaceships and that sort of thing.
Kind of like the Star Trek movies using a brewery for the Enterprise's
the
engineering section.
Yes, the Enterprise runs on beer. So, but that's another show.
That's a good thing.
So I liked it. One line that the Doctor has early on when he's told, the catalog, how bad things are and they're doomed. He says, "Oh, listen to you, defeated before you've even started. Where's your Dunkirk spirit?" And I like that reference, the Dunkirk spirit there, which is of course a reference to the
British evacuation during World War II that in an otherwise catastrophic situation that allowed them to come back and be resilient in the war.
Right, and that was pulled off mainly, in large part, by civilians stepping up and taking on that task of evacuation. So, but I like that one. And then we had TARDIS separation. Then we get companion separation. Martha goes off with Riley, the aforementioned Riley, to open the steel doors to the bridge, which
and again for a plausible reason.
Yes, and I like the gimmick in that as well, which is that the doors are sealed, they're deadlocked for security purposes, and the only way to unlock it is you have to answer a bunch of these questions, which you know how it is when you've got security questions on your password on your account and you forgot your password, and you got to remember, what did I put down? Because you're not supposed to put the actual answer these days, right? You're not supposed to put down where you actually live because that can be Googled. Where you were born or what your mother's maiden name was. You're not supposed to actually use that stuff. You have to remember what it is you said.
Don't they have two-factor authentication in the 42nd century or whatever year this was?
Yeah, so this is something that if you stop to think about it, as I did, the security procedures with these doors are pretty ridiculous. I mean, they're ridiculously hard to get through. They have cover for that though, to some degree, because they explained that the crew got drunk and came up with the questions, and so I can imagine while they were drunk, they also made this much harder than it should be, because there should be emergency ways to cut through these things that don't exist. Well, and I assume those got eliminated in the drunken reprogramming session.
Not just did the crew get drunk, but it wasn't even the same crew.
Right.
There's turnover in the crew, so
some turnover in the crew. Yeah.
I want to know who the drunken crew member is who still had the wherewithal to come up with happy primes as a
exactly.
So
obviously,
can you explain that to one, Jimmy?
Oh, sure.
What's a happy prime?
So it involves two kinds of numbers: happy numbers and prime numbers. Everyone pretty much knows prime numbers. It's a number that's divisible only by itself in one. So 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, and so forth are all prime numbers. But numbers like 4 is not, because you can divide it both by itself and 1 and 2 and have a whole remainder. A happy number is a number if you take the individual digits of the number and square them and add them up and keep doing that. So you iterate the process. It'll eventually go to 1. If it doesn't go to 1, it'll go to the number 4 and then have a cyclical loop of 8 numbers it just cycles through. And those are called sad numbers because they never get down to 1. An example of a happy number is 100. So if you take 1, square it, that's 1. 0, square it, that's 0. Another 0, square that, that's 0. So 1 plus 0 plus 0 is 1. So 100 is a happy number in one step.
Right. So a lot of those numbers will end up, happy numbers will end up at 100.
Right.
Which you then go to
and then reduce to 1. Yeah. Yep. So any number that's both happy and prime is a happy prime.
Okay. And then so the Doctor saw the sequence and knew exactly what it was immediately, because on Gallifrey, recreational math is a thing.
And here on Earth too. I'm going to have a pick at the end of the show about that.
Oh, good.
Interesting.
Good. So we kind of jumped ahead but you did mention the problem is, what's causing this issue is that there's an infection among the crew that starts with Corwin, who's the husband of the captain, and he's infected and disabled pretty early on, and taken to the sick bay where they're trying to put him into stasis, and he's thrashing and opens his eyes and light bursts out and vaporizes poor Dr. Abby. Yeah. And he's now become a sort of star zombie. I mean, spoilers. So what happens is this star that they're falling into is the star alive? I didn't quite get that.
Yes.
The star is alive.
That's what they came up with. They directly said the star is alive, which I love because, as you, Dom, know, we've mentioned a couple of times on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World the idea that stars might fit the definition of life.
Yeah.
Because they consume energy, they have metabolism that's stable over periods of time, they reproduce. They explode and give birth to other stars. And because those later stars have greater metallicity, they evolve over time.
Right.
So you have a lot of the characteristics of life in stars, even if they're not sentient like this one is. And so this one displays qualities that ordinary stars don't. And given the age of the universe, there wouldn't be enough time for this to evolve, this kind of star to evolve naturally. But maybe it came from another universe, or maybe someone monkeyed with its evolution.
There you go. Yeah, and so it's alive even when pieces of it are separated from the whole. The parts are still part of the whole, even separated by distance or inside someone. And the star is mad because the ship uses an illegal scoop to scoop sun from fuel from the sun.
Yeah, fusing solar plasma. It's a fusion scoop. And so they've been it's, what would you think if someone came along and just started, scooping huge chunks out of your body?
Right. I think, ow.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, I was trying to come up with a plausible explanation for why such devices, fusion scoops, would be illegal. I mean, maybe just because they're dangerous to the crew of the ship. They could be dangerous in several different ways. One thing that occurred to me was they could be illegal because some people, obviously not Captain McDonnell, know that stars can be alive. Right.
But now McDonnell doesn't know that. And she says, well, how can a star be alive? Right. But she also knows she was supposed to have scanned for life, but said she didn't, because it would have taken too long and they could have been caught. So that would suggest there's some lengthy scanning process for life that protocol says you're supposed to use on a star, and she skipped that step. So there's a little cognitive dissonance there for me. Well, why, if she knew she's supposed to scan a star for life, why would she be surprised that a star might turn up alive on such a scan? Right.
I mean, why would they have her scanning stars for life if it was, if no one knew that was a possibility? Yeah. Right.
I mean, even if you take away this idea that stars could be alive, just the fact of, you can think of it like from a mining argument of, depleting stars. You can see that being an actual concern. Although admittedly, there's a lot of material in a star, but depending on how interstellar cargo ships there are flying around there,
Well, and here's
even a small star and in tens of thousands of cargo ships, it would still take a lot to deplete a star.
Yeah, it would, but this is space fantasy. Also, one thing that could make it dangerous is not just for the people on the ship, but also people in nearby solar systems, because the thing that causes supernovas is when stars burn through their nuclear fuel, and it changes the internal dynamic in the star, and it leads to a supernova. And so if you take enough matter out of the right kind of star, it could lead to an early supernova that might not be scheduled to occur for millions or billions of years. And all of a sudden, wham, all of the nearby solar systems get blasted with supernova radiation.
I mean, easy assumption to say that they're taking, a percentage of the star's mass, but we don't know. Again, like you said, though, this is space fusion or space fantasy, so
it is necessary that it be illegal. Let's just say that. So we did mention that Martha runs into the question that nobody can answer: who had the most numbers pre-download, which is fun. Most number one hits, Elvis or the Beatles, and so she phones a friend,
and the doctor doesn't know. Although immediately thereafter, he's just kind of babbling, and he says, "Here comes the sun."
Reference acknowledged, doctor. So Martha phones a friend, calls her mom to have her look it up on the internet, which was, again, a nice walk down old
Rose.
technology lane. As her mom, I have to plug in the mouse.
Yeah, yeah.
Hurry, mom! This is life or death. Who knew that looking that up on Google would be life or death? A question like that. But meanwhile, her mom is trying to get her to talk about the doctor and this concern, and where we're continuing on from last time, which was with the Professor Lazarus's debacle. Where this fellow from the Harold Saxon Prime Minister of Britain, from his staff, approached her, Martha's mom, Francine, to.
He's not Prime Minister yet, but he's a candidate for Prime Minister.
It was election day. Was when they mentioned that it was election day.
Right. And so he'd approached her to kind of warn her about the doctor.
Yeah, I like also how even though Martha's mom is being influenced by the Harold Saxon people, she's not like all on board, because she at the end when one of the aides mentions that it's election day, she says, "You don't expect me to tell you who I voted for."
Right. Yeah. And she said, "I'm not inviting you in for tea." As they pack, because that's what we find out later, is that the Saxons people are in Francine's home, tapping the call,
trying to trace
where Martha is with the doctor.
Yeah. So the implication then is that the master, because that's who we're going to eventually learn Harold Saxon is trying to figure out where the doctor is through his companion.
Right.
And the companion's family. What I really liked in this episode, even though Martha's mom is largely unsympathetic, like Jackie Tyler was initially, she comes across, I don't know, I was pretty unsympathetic with Jackie in the beginning. But she comes across much more sympathetic in this episode, because she's been told, she's genuinely concerned about her daughter. She's been told this stuff about the doctor. She's scared for her daughter. She's taken up with this strange man who's putting her in dangerous situations. She gets this hysterical, crazy call.
Yes.
Needing to know this trivial fact, and her best explanation is, what is this, like a pub quiz? And she's thinking that her daughter's gone crazy over something trivial. And then later in the episode, when Martha and Riley are in the escape pod, she calls back basically to say goodbye without telling her mom that she thinks she's about to die. And and her mom picks up on it, that she's in grave danger and really cares about her. And it's a really sympathetic side to her mom. And then as the camera pans, we see the Saxonade in the background. And so it's this mix of, it's very interestingly textured emotionally.
Yes, that's true. Yes, it's part of the arc that they're creating for this season. Which is planned from the beginning, but the arc is now progressing even further through this episode. We have another character, Irina. She's sort of like the mechanic's mate on board the ship, and she dies pretty early. She doesn't get much to do, except she has one point where she's all mad at the other guy and says, "Ugh, just kill me now," and turns around and there's a guy and he kills her. A little bit of ironic statement there. See, the doctor is convinced that they've come into contact with something, while McDonald denies it. But McDonald's denials seem forced, seem insincere. Like, she really does know something's going on.
By the way, in the medical examination of Corwin, one thing for American viewers that might be a little puzzling is they say his internal temperature is 100 degrees, and they're all agog at that. And it's like, okay, why 98.6 is normal human body temperature? Why is having a mild fever a big deal? Well, that's because this is in the Celsius scale, and on the Celsius scale, 100 degrees is the temperature at which water boils.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is over 200 degrees.
And his body oxygen was being replaced by hydrogen, they said. So
that's nice and explosive.
Yes, exactly. Hot hydrogen. So we talked about Martha and Riley get chased into an airlock by Corwin, and they end up. I mean, it's like a bad place to hide. You know what I mean? Not just an airlock, but an escape pod on the airlock. And it's like, oh well, he'll take care of that. And he tries to eject them, and they're both. I don't know what it is. Like they're tapping the keypad to try to block each other, and it just looks like this random banging on the wall.
One of them is wearing
anything.
And the Corwin is wearing a big bulky glove that's going to make his rapid keypadding super accurate.
Right, and then eventually it works by just punching it.
Only thing I could think of was that he was the one in the pod there was setting like security codes very quickly.
It could be.
But it's kind of interesting that his system is so that he could just quickly keep punching the keypads and keep setting these security codes or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of keypad troubles, later when the Doctor has been infected with the sun stuff, he tells Martha to cool him down to in the stasis chamber to cool him down to minus 200, which is negative 328 on the Fahrenheit scale and just 130 degrees from absolute zero. So that's quite cold. But what I noticed is there is no minus sign on the keypad. So Martha just punches in 200. And the machine somehow knows to make that negative, not positive.
200 for 40 minutes until it takes an internal temperature.
Yeah.
And then he'll be done. As you mentioned, the Doctor screaming through the vacuum of space as the escape pod falls away from the ship is a pretty effective moment there. You know, he keeps yelling, "I'll save you, I'll save you," but there's no music, no nothing else, and it's just quiet, and it's that effective sort of space horror moment. And then in the escape pod, Martha and Riley talk about the people they're leaving behind as they feel like they're doomed. So Martha calls her mom, but Riley doesn't have anybody to talk to, but encourages her to call her family. I wonder if Riley ever gets the sense at any point that Martha might not be like him from, you know, the time period. I mean, the fact is she's got a phone that can call across the universe in her hand, you know. Maybe
they've got that in the 42nd century or whenever this is.
Yeah, and he just doesn't have it on him. That could be. So Ashton, who's the other one who gets infected by Corwin, he gets lured into sickbay and shoved in the stasis chamber where he's killed.
Yeah, Kath kills him. Captain McDonald kills him by freezing him.
Yep. Then the Doctor is going to go out into space to save Martha, even though the other guy, the mechanic, Scannell, says it will kill him. But of course, the Doctor will survive because, you know, the Doctor. Now, this is where I have a little bit of another question. The Doctor's going to remagnetize the hull to pull the pod back.
Right.
With the pod so far away, and given the star's magnetosphere, which is surrounding them, how would such a thing even work? Like, why would it be operated from outside the ship? I have to go outside the ship to flip a lever. That just seems really bad.
So this is one of the things about this episode is this starship is not well designed.
No,
like they the whole thing about they have to get to the other end of the ship to turn on the auxiliary engines, which are meant for emergencies.
Right.
You'd think any emergency system should be accessible from any terminal in the whole place.
Certainly not where the main control is on the bridge, which is when there's an emergency, it might be because the bridge has been incapacitated.
Right. Yeah. So it's like they can only turn on the main engines from this one area, and they can only turn on the auxiliary engines from this other area, and they can only magnetize the hull by going outside. You know, I can imagine explanations involving all the sabotage that was done, but it's not; those aren't provided to us.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you got the stasis chamber is controlled by a big, nasty main power switch right in the middle of engineering, too. Right. You know, I mean,
that I cut him a little slack on because, you know, there would be a line that, let's just depower the med bay.
Right. It's a circuit breaker, essentially. Yeah. So the Doctor gets infected with the star and
it's a nice subversion of his moment of triumph because it's like he's just saved Martha and there's the beginning of triumph and then he realizes he's infected.
Right. And
however,
so he
through his spacesuit, however, somehow that sun creature got through his spacesuit to infect him.
Yeah. And the doctor, wants to be put into the stasis chamber, as you mentioned, and frozen, have the sun frozen out of him. And he starts to explain regeneration to Martha. You noticed.
And he's saying, "I'm scared. I'm so scared."
Yeah,
that's really nice to see the doctor scared like that.
Right. Although I was sitting there going, okay, instead of spending all this time chatting about how scared you are, and put him in the chamber. Just put him in. It's time's wasting. We're all gonna die. So
she was being the nice doctor, the bedside manner, reassuring your patient, and instead of just jamming them in there and hitting the button.
Sometimes you should ignore your training.
Yes, exactly. Put him in. Push the button. McDonald sacrifices herself to kill the creature in Corwin because Corwin is lost at this point. He's not. He's dead. The doctor has told McDonald. And then
that was another nice moment where she said, "Don't give me false hope," and he says, "He's gone. There's no coming back." Right. I'm sorry.
Right. It was a hard, brutal moment, but necessary. Let's see. Coincidentally or not, and this is an interesting little observation. The sun here, the star, only possesses men, and those it possesses only kill women.
Oh.
Now, I wonder what that was about. If that was so the Dr. Corwin and Ashton all get possessed, but McDonald, Irina, and Abby are all killed by the sun creature.
Well, I'm not sure about this deconstruction of falling stars. That's a Babylon 5 reference.
Yes.
I don't look at the world through that lens, so that never even occurred to me. But
I just thought it was a weird.
Now that you pointed out, it is mathematically true in this episode.
There we go. The star is sexist.
Something, I don't know. I mean, I just was curious if Chibnall maybe had a point he was making, or I don't know. I mean, or just this happened to be the characters.
It could be also that this is just speculation. I mean, it could be these were open castings and they didn't even have genders picked out for these characters because except for Kath and Corwin being married, which wouldn't even matter now, but it did at the time. Yeah. They may have not even had genders assigned to these characters in the script.
Right.
But if they did, and if it was a deliberate choice, I would assume it's because evolutionarily men are designed to protect women, and consequently it tugs the audience's feel, and consequently, women have less like body strength and so forth, less upper body strength, and so statistically, and so there's a feeling of vulnerability that can be brought into play in the horror sense. We're going to feel more empathetic for a woman under threat than a man under threat.
Right. Corwin's a big, strong dude, whereas, Irina, for example, is smaller and weaker. And so having him attack her is horrible to us. It's a horror thing. It's space horror. That's what makes it so horrible. So I said horror.
That's one of the things that makes Ripley such a great protagonist in Alien.
Yes. Because she subverts that.
Yeah, and she's a strong woman who takes care of herself, but she's also a woman, and that makes her more empathetic than if that was just some guy.
Right.
And it was a very, in this episode, it was a very powerful image to see these very big men with those big welder's masks on. Dehumanizing
welders' masks.
Right. That was clearly the idea between the masks, was to kind of dehumanize them and make them a sort of faceless entity. And then, of course, but it's McDonald who is strong and, takes that. It's a really an empathetic moment. I mean, she in love saves the others, sacrifices herself, and takes Corwin with her, or what remains of him. Yep. So speaking of men and women, at the end, Martha has a kiss with Riley.
One thing before we hit the very end. So this throughout the ship, now they don't do what they did on 24, which is actually put a running clock on the screen.
Yeah.
But what they do instead is they have the ship's computer periodically updating us, like how many minutes until 42 minutes until sundive, which is that would be a Hitchhiker's Guide reference.
Yeah.
But at the end, we stop hearing time updates from the computer, and we instead hear survival estimate projection 0%.
Right.
And this is like the worst moment. It's like we're all going to die. The computer has confirmed it. What they should have, but this comes out of nowhere. They didn't have previous survival estimates. And so it's a flaw in the writing. It's a minor flaw, but it's a flaw in the writing. If they're going to do that at the end, they should set it up by having survival estimate 80%, survival estimate 45%, survival estimate 17%. You need to count that down like you're counting down the time if you're going to make that dramatic 0% at the end.
Now, they did have the heat shield countdown where heat shield at 25, heat shield failing 25%, heat shield failing 10%, and so on. And I think that was just kind of an extension of that is how they did it.
Then they should have said heat shield gone. And made the connection. They could have said
imminent failure of heat shield, survival estimate 0.
Right. Yeah. They needed to just tweak it on the dialogue level.
Yeah, that's true. Otherwise, impact. Well, they did have impact in 217, survival estimate projection 0%, and then the line life support systems critical impact in 106. So there was still counting down at that point, I guess. And then collision alert. They took it. I'm curious where they were going to have them collide with, whether it's the photosphere, the surface of how close were they actually going to get to this planet before they were destroyed? That's
what I figured is the ship would more melt and crush in the gravity of the star before it would even actually contact the surface, if you will.
And that's what I liked, that they did cover that in the dialogue where this like to point of fatal whatever.
Right.
They did. So they knew that this is like, you're not going to be able to get all the way down to the surface before you're gone.
Right. Mm-hmm. Although it is one of those things with all science fiction does this. It's not just Doctor Who. It's the bright line. As long as you get away, as long as you solve it 1 second before you get to that bright line, you're saved. Cross the line, you're doomed. And it's
cutting the red wire on the bomb with 1 second left.
Yeah. Right. But it just does. How does that work?
There's never a you're maimed.
Yeah,
which, by the way, the scene in Galaxy Quest about that was brilliant.
Oh, I have to remember
the self-destruct. The ship self-destruct was activated, and they hit the button, and it kept counting because, of course, it had to keep counting to 1 second for dramatic purposes.
Right. That's right. So I mentioned that Martha gets a kiss with Riley, which apparently
he's sweet on her.
They bonded. The crush on the Doctor, though. Although with a lot of these things, it seems like the crushes and whatnot survive these transitory flings as they travel about. So I guess it doesn't really mean much.
Well, Martha has no intention of staying with this guy. She's just letting him off nice. I mean, she recognizes that he's a good guy, and this is a Princess Leia for luck in your future life kiss.
That's right.
And notice how she says it. It was nice, not dying with you.
that is. The Doctor, as you mentioned, gives Martha the TARDIS key as a frequent flyer privilege, and then we end with Francine's home back at Martha's mom's house with Francine and the sinister woman who has been tapping the phone, and the dialogue over have you voted?
Now I want to know if their taps are just temporal or are they
spatial
both time
or temporal?
And space? Yeah, right. Spatial or temporal? Yeah.
Are they tracking are they using the Time Lord technology?
Yeah.
So that's all. I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, there's not much more to than that. I mean, do you have any more notes, either of you, on this episode?
Father, you first.
Just one minor thing is those windows on that spaceship must have really, really good solar glazing. The fact that they can look directly into a sun and it not completely blind them instantly.
Yes, that's true. Jimmy?
Okay, so here's my pick. As we know, in this episode, the Doctor utters the line, "Don't they teach recreational mathematics anymore?" And then you have Matt. So this is the 10th Doctor, David Tennant. Then the 11th Doctor is Matt Smith, and he's got this manic presentation style. And then the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi, actually becomes a lecturer at a university. And so you could imagine, what if you had a blend of these doctors, 10th, 11th, and 12th, who is an actual lecturer in recreational mathematics at a British university? Well, we're going to have something in the show notes, because there is a comedy mathematician math professor in England named Matt Parker. And he is startlingly like Matt Smith in his presentation style and accent and things like that. And he gave a lecture for the Royal Institute. They have these Christmas lectures over in England at the Royal Institute every year on matters of math and science. And he gives this one on four-dimensional recreational mathematics. It is absolutely hilarious and amazing. It's called Things to See and Do in the Fourth Dimension. And nice. And so I watched this recently, and I thought, wow, this is like the Doctor doing lectures on recreational mathematics. So I'll send the link over to you, Dom, and we'll put it in the show notes.
We'll definitely put that in. That's awesome. So I think that's it on 42. Before we go, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who. Today, we're thanking particularly by name Patricia S., Joseph S., Philip C., Father Terrence, and Anusha M. through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give. They make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows we do at sqpn.com. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of this story? 42. Let us know by visiting sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Leave us some feedback there, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. You'll find that link that Jimmy gave us on our show notes at sqpn.com. And we'll be back next time. We'll be discussing the 5th Doctor story, Kinda. I said it right this time.
Yeah.
Kinda, not kinda. Kinda. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Dom.
Father Corey Stika, thank you as well.
Well, thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, burn with me.
Right. This is going to be fun.